Welcome to the Wealth Fact. Today we welcome Julius. Julius is a digital content creator. His work is inspired by cosmopolitan culture and stems from his travels and multitude of high-profile projects he's worked on before becoming a career artist in 2021. Of Afrikaans background, he was born in Rupert during the end of the apartheid era and grew up alongside a vibrant and flourishing South American democracy. He studied motion picture, music, information technology, and electrical engineering. Thank you for being on podcast, Julius.
Thanks for having me, Alvin.
Uh, Starting off, how was it growing up in South Africa?
South Africa is a great place to be from. It's very diverse. We're also known as the Rainbow Nation. And when Mandela came into power in 94, we rewrote our constitution to focus predominantly on human rights. So in black and white, South Africa is one of the most liberal or most human rights aware constitutions on the planet. And it's interesting growing up in an environment like that where we actually value life regardless of economic status or social, cultural heritage.
And being from there, how was like growing up in schooling? Because I think most people have an image of South America as being very poor, very like almost like third world when it might not be the case.
Mhm. So South Africa is definitely classified as a third world territory, but we do have pockets of first world infrastructure. So I grew up in Johannesburg, which is one of the largest cities in Africa. And also because of the way the city got its start, which was in the gold rush, I think in the 1800s, we have a lot of first world infrastructure, be it electricity, street lights, internet, highways, municipal installations. So I grew up in Johannesburg, which is considered, to be first world. And today I find myself living in Cape Town, which is one of three other first world pockets in Southern Africa.
It's pretty interesting. And what did you study while you were in South Africa? Like your major, and how did that work?
So I am pretty much, or for a very long time, I was considered to be a professional student. I spent about 8 years after high school focusing or studying full time in different fields. So the first one was in IT engineering. So I'm an internationally accredited IT engineer, which has a lot to do with networks and hardware. After that, I felt like my student life was too short-lived, and I convinced my father to extend my studies. And that brought me onto a wonderful path at AFTA, which is the South African School for Motion Picture, Medium, and Live Performance, which is a mouthful. But to sum it up, it's one of the top film schools on the planet. And in South Africa, it's considered one of the top six private institutions. So there, I started off as a music student, where I was doing music production for stage and for narrative. But after my first year of studies, even though it went very well, my sponsors felt like there was not enough job security as a performer. So I was given like the ultimatum, either go behind the camera and study something like producing or cinematography or whatever the case might be, and we'll continue paying for your studies, or you have to stop studying. And as unfair as I felt that, as unfair as I thought that was at the time, it was actually very wise. And when returning to film school the next year, I enrolled as a producing student. So I got my degree in producing with my second major in cinematography and then a sub major in script writing. After that, I started doing some work in the international sports production space, and it went really well. I worked with the Brazilian media for the Confed Cup, with the German media for the World Cup. But in between those assignments, I somehow managed to squeeze in my trade test as an electrician. So I have a International Red Seal as a trade electrician, which is low voltage and medium voltage. Um, did that. That led to a really long assignment in KwaZulu-Natal for about 3 years. And in 2012, when I moved down to Cape Town, I enrolled at the Soul Candy Institute for Music, where I did my DJing 101 and advanced music production techniques. And that's pretty much the just of my academic qualifications, but I'm also like an eternal student. So I'm always reading something, listening to something, trying to expand my knowledge base and just tinker. I love exploring and figuring things out.
How was it working for FIFA and the World Cup? Because I know that's a big dream for a lot of people to go see these
Yeah,
big events, and you got to work at one.
yeah. That was awesome. I'm not gonna lie to you. That was probably like one of the best things that could ever have happened to me because once I finished film school, I was recruited. So I was headhunted by a local sports production company in anticipation of these two tournaments. So we have the big tournament in 2010, which is it's the World Cup. But the year before, we have the dress rehearsal, which is known as the Confederations Cup. And I got to be uh, part of both of them. So for the dress rehearsal for the Confed Cup, I was touring with Bandeirantes TV out of Brazil, and I was a production manager for them. So that meant that I was their local liaison, but also made sure that their preparations were um, intact before they got here. So made sure that they had all their equipment, all their crew, accommodation, transportation, whatever they would need to do their assignment here for 6, 8 weeks. That was my responsibility. And then the next year, I got recruited by ZDF, which is a German broadcaster, but also I think they're the largest broadcaster in Europe. And working with them was just amazing, to see the level at which broadcasters in that space operate really set the tone for things to come because they have like a whole bunch of containers packed and shipped way in advance. So their container for the World Cup in 2010 maybe arrived in South Africa as early as 2008. And what happens is they unpack it for the tournament. They have it set up running for maybe a month, 2 months. And then from there, it's packed up in a very specific way because let's face it, they're Germans and they love being organized. And then once it's packed up, it's set off to the next destination, which at that stage, I think may have been like the Olympics. I want to say Russia, but I don't think maybe Russia. I'm not sure. But they informed me that they had at least 8 containers like these, like 8 mobile stadiums that they're just waiting to unpack and assemble for these huge sporting events at all times. And that just gave me phenomenal insight into the level of which one can plan and anticipate. And when I got onto my next assignment, which was in a completely different industry, having worked with best in the world on one of the biggest, if not the biggest production on the planet, it gave me a really good baseline from which I've always been operating from. So very thankful for that opportunity. It it opened up so many doors because from the get-go, people understood that I know what international broadcast quality looks like, but I also know how to deliver and execute on that level.
Yeah, that must be amazing to work with such a big company right away. And did you feel intimidated or like when first going into it? Because I know like when you get a high profile job, you might feel like nervous or scared that you might not be as ready as you can, but you're willing to learn.
I think it's a combination of both. I'm thankful that I got to do the dress rehearsal with the Brazilians. I mean, the style of the two production companies is completely different. With Brazil, there's a lot of anticipation. Things are happening in the moment. You get the call in the morning and it has to get done in the afternoon. But with the Germans, everything is planned in advance, and your only responsibility is to operate in the tasks that have been delegated to you. So with Brazil, you have to be multifaceted and think on your toes. But with the Germans, you have one job, but you have to make sure that you do that one job to the best of your ability. So yeah, I mean, it is definitely intimidating, but also the training that I had received, the experience, and I also think like the fact that I am South African and I've been exposed to so many different cultures and ways of working together with different people. Um, it's still, I still had the confidence to proceed. And I understood that whenever I was stuck or if I needed help, there were people in my senior positions or people employed above me that I could reach out to for assistance and guidance. So, yeah, it was excellent. It was great.
That's pretty good to hear. And then after that, I read that you went to Ibiza. How did you go about that shift? Because I know from what I've seen, I've never been to Ibiza, but it's like a party city, and I'm used to like a lot of people would want to go to like a calm area. Like I enjoyed going to Cancun where it's a calm vibe, like peaceful, not much going on. But how was that
Yeah.
experience?
Okay, so before I get into Ibiza, I just want to fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
So I finished up with the World Cup. And then I was working with my dad, who owned a construction, reticulation, and lighting company in South Africa at that stage. And I was asked to go to KwaZulu-Natal, which is like the Miami of South Africa, and do a graphic information system for them, which means is we building a Google Earth-like environment of the low voltage and medium voltage assets on the grid. So I had developed a curriculum or workflow and employed people below me. I think at one stage we were 30 teams with 70 full-time employees and 500 freelancers. And all they had to do day in and day out was go to the equipment, log a GPS coordinate, take a collection of photos. Each piece of equipment had its own shot list, and then fill in an inspection form. And when we did the pilot project, we had it all printed out and filling it in by hand. But around that time, the iPad had become available in South Africa, which allowed us to, in the last month of the pilot project, pivot into a paperless solution where it was all digital and all immediate. Um, so yeah, I did that assignment for about 2.5 years. We did, I would have to guess about 35 million photos over 18, 20 months. And at the end of it, I ended up in hospital with stress related um, illnesses, if you want to call it that. So yeah, it was pretty severe. I thought that it might be a terminal or chronic illness. But thankfully, I was still young. I was fit before all this happened, so the body responded easily. But it was definitely a wake-up call because when you're in um, like a frail care hospital with all these uncertainties and all this pressure, you start asking yourself some pretty important questions like, am I happy? If I were not to be here in a year's time, would I have achieved what I set out to achieve? And so forth. I was in that hospital bed for about a week. And when I eventually got into a space where I was healthy and all the rehabilitation had been done, I made a very conscious decision to step out of corporate and explore the creative world. And it's around that time where I moved down to Cape Town. I studied at Soul Candy, the DJing course I mentioned. And towards the end of it, my lecturers were like, hey, dude, we're going to Ibiza for IMS. It's the International Music Summit for like 1 or 2 weeks. Do you want to come with? And I was like, that actually sounds like a lot of fun. So, long story short, I had the funds. I got all the visas sorted out in time, and I went to Ibiza for what was supposed to be a 2 week holiday. And while at the IMS, I met a colleague from Germany. So I hadn't known him yet, but he was a regional manager for diginights.com, which is Europe's largest event portal. And long story short, he needed a photographer to cover all the high profile events in Ibiza. He couldn't pay me because there was no budget, but he could give me accommodation, he could drive me around, and he could give me access to all the nightclubs in Ibiza. So what was supposed to be a 2 week holiday turned into like a 3 month working holiday or just an experience of pure excitement and escapism. And the way Visa works is it's nowadays it spreads about 100 100 to 120 days. But with the South African passport, you're only allowed a maximum of 90. So I got to experience the first part of the Ibiza season, um, and felt that I missed out on not doing the second half. So immediately when I got back home, I spoke to my friend from Germany, and started making preparations for the next season, where I would join towards the second half, um, which happened. So that was my second season. For the third and fourth season, I'd secured a residency with the German company, so I could work in Europe for 2 years. And during those 4 years, I probably covered 1,000 high-profile events between Ibiza, Germany, a little bit of Switzerland, and then Johannesburg and Cape Town here in South Africa.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. How was it working with these like DJs and other artists, like filming them, like being in that moment of them performing and like they enjoy their performance? So how was it seeing them?
Yeah. So if I can try and sum it up, because it's nearly unfathomable to express an experience like that. But one of the key things I observed is that magic is contagious. So now I'm in a DJ booth with David Guetta, or with Black Coffee or Carl Cox or Bob Sinclair or whoever, the fact that they're there and I know their music intimately, I've grown up with it since a very young age. It just reinforced that belief that you can make a living, from your art. You can make a living as a creative, because look, here are all these people that you've only heard of right in front of you, and they are happy, they are fulfilled, they are excelling. And that, I think that was the biggest thing, or the best thing I could ask for, is that proximity, because a lot of their magic, their confidence, um, their creative spirit stuck to me. And even though I haven't been in the island since before lockdown, it's still got very deep roots in my creative process. Uh, so yeah, that that's probably the best I can answer it at the moment.
And then where did you go from Ibiza? Did you continue photography or did you switch to any other formats of art?
So my first 7 years, I think I started going to Ibiza 2012, 2013. Um, if I like when I had the residency in Europe, I stayed on. So I would finish my season in Ibiza, go to Germany, do some assignments there, back to Ibiza, and then Germany. But for the other 4 years, I would do 3 months of Ibiza and then come back to South Africa. So yeah, up until lockdown, so that's 2019, I was predominantly operating as a photographer. But towards 2019, my last season in Ibiza, so it was my seventh season in Ibiza, I realized that I was no longer enjoying it as much as I should. Now I'd done about 1,200 events. I've seen all the clubs. I've been in all the backstage and DJ booths, been to all the after parties, and now it's just become routine. It's become monotonous. And with that sort of like stagnation averse approach, I intentionally started uh, not accepting assignments for Ibiza anymore, and instead focused on how do I capitalize on my existing portfolio. Because I mean, I have hard drives upon hard drives of high resolution raw photos of crazy stuff. And I'm sure that there's a way that I could monetize those. Because keep in mind, while doing these assignments for the German company, it was effectively an unpaid internship. So it's pretty much the same arrangement. They don't have a budget. They can give you accommodation, they can give you access and a little bit of fuel. But everything else, paying for your flights, getting your visas, eating, whatever it is that you needed to do, you had to do on the side additionally. So that definitely helped me cultivate a very strong work ethic. Um, but yeah, so at the end of 2019, I came back to South Africa and I said, look, I love doing these events, but they're not generating as much revenue as I'd like. So let me figure out how I can sell these online, because uh, the fact is people meet a lot of important people in those settings. So either you go to Ibiza as a tourist and you meet your significant other or your future life partner there. Or maybe you meet a good of like a set of good friends, or you go there with family, whatever the case might be. The experience that people have there is of such a high intensity. It's got such an impact on them that I figured they would always want a reminder of that experience, of that event. So yeah, that was the seed for the fine art. And I think it was in 2016. Yeah, 2016. I approached the IMS. So again, IMS International Music Summit. They have a gala dinner which they use to raise funds for a music school here in Cape Town called Bridges for Music. So I volunteered to donate some of my photos that I had taken the year before of Carl Cox and Pepe Rosilio, who was the founder of Space. Um, and when those images went on auction, we raised quite a lot of capital. So the we had two photos. The first one sold for £2,000. The second one sold for £3,000. But Pepe, the person who was being honored at this gala dinner, loved one of the pieces so much that he offered to put down another €10,000 if we would print one for him too. So that's three pieces of art that we sold in maybe 2 hours, and it generated about €12,000 for the music school, which in South African rands, my local currency, that's R250,000 with three pieces of art. And all of a sudden, this inclination, this intuition that I had now been verified. They had confirmed, they'd given me proof of concept that yes, these events are special. Um, and when put in front of the right clientele, people will buy it.
And could you go more in depth on what fine art is? Because I think most of us, including myself, don't really have a clear picture of what it actually is because we see it online, but we're not sure what it is really about.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's a very vague term, but I think to understand what fine art is, you have to understand what its companion art form looks like. So the companion art form is commercial art. Commercial art being I'm an artist and a brand approaches me to create something to help them sell a product. So either you do something and Nike puts your design on their shoes or on a t-shirt, or you work with a high profile DJ for their album art or their press kits or whatever the case might be. Those are all commercial assignments. Is people pay you for a result, and that result is then leveraged to generate additional revenue for them. Fine art is a little bit more experimental. It's a little bit more ethereal. So for me, as a fine artist, I see immediate parallels between being an entrepreneur and being a fine artist because there's a lot of experimenting going on. There's a lot of like, what am I experiencing? What am I feeling? What do I feel life in general is guiding me towards? Like, what are the insights that I'm having? Um, and how do I effectively communicate those concepts? So it's a little bit of storytelling. It's a lot of entrepreneurship. But at the end of the day, fine art is experimental art. It's people just figuring it out and making it available to traditional art collectors as opposed to selling it to a brand or a DJ or a client like that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's a pretty good description. Pretty clear, very simple to understand. Did you use your art to express yourself? Because I think everyone finds a mode to express themselves, like DJs through music, artists through different formats. How did you see your art as the expression of yourself?
Hmm. Well, I think it's important to understand that fundamentally all human beings are creations and as such have the ability to create. Ergo, we are all creative or creatives. Some people choose to use that creative energy in an administrative component, by being bookkeepers or managers. Other people do that by being educators or being in the healing and medicinal fields. Um, but yeah, for me, I felt that I could add the most value using an art form and specifically using a visual art form. Because by the time I arrived in Ibiza, I had just finished a massive photography assignment, which had us do 35 million photos. I had spent 4 years at film school. I'd made short films. I had worked with many top, excuse me, top tier creatives. And then, of course, we had the World Cup as well. So, when I started studying music and I was exposed to like very successful South African DJs here, it became immediately apparent that for me to start here and to meet them where they are would take me like 5 or 10 years. There's a lot of investment of time for me to get to that level where I'm like, okay, now I'm an internationally acclaimed musician slash DJ. But what I realized is because of my photography and everything that I mentioned before, I was sort of like already there. And if I could just use or find the correct opportunity to leverage it, I could put myself in that same bracket, but as a visual artist or as a photographer. So that's pretty much how it happened. I have a really good understanding of lighting because of working in my dad's lighting factory for many, many, many years, because of the academic, like theoretical training in film and lighting there as well. Um, so yeah, those are the decisions that helped me decide what kind of artist I was going to be. And it's mostly based on what I had already done.
And
So yeah, I,
and how did you go
I
shift?
hope that answers.
Oh, it does. How did you go from shifting also to NFTs? Because I also saw on your website you have NFTs, and I really enjoy the more modern stuff that some people like that stick to the classics don't find like art. They're just like, oh, it's just an image online, but there's more to it. How did you discover it? How did you push yourself to get into the space when other artists would, especially at the beginning, a few years back, would say, oh, it's nothing, just nothing to not be a part of it?
So have you ever heard the expression, when the student is ready, the master appears?
No, I have not.
Okay. It's something that's very prominent in Eastern philosophy. And that is what happened. So we had gone into lockdown. I had stopped taking any assignments from Ibiza. And now the only way that I could generate revenue or income was in the online space, specifically because everything else had shut down. I was an event photographer, I was a boudoir photographer. I was out on the beach, or I was in a nightclub and I was taking photos, and all those things had shut down. So what happened is I started building my own website because I have an aptitude and I have some training. And then later on, uh, other photographers, other artists reached out to me saying, "Hey, dude, I really like the websites that you're building. Can you build one for me? Like, how much do you charge?" And that has become sort of like a business solution in its own. But keep in mind, the first year, 2 years that I was building my fine art collections and putting it on my website, I was gumping it, like Forrest Gump. I was just figuring it out, thumb sucking, figuring out how the software works, how to build it. And late 2020, I saw an ad online for Jason Matthias. He had a course called The Art of Selling Art. And this was a career creative out of North America who had already exhibited in all the spaces that I could wish to exhibit, had an abundance of experience, and he was also an educator by profession. So he knew how to impart his wisdom in meaningful ways. So that's when the big shift happened is I found a coach, I found a mentor that could help me bridge sort of like all the unfamiliar territory. Like Jason is somebody who's done what I want to do. And instead of me sort of like tripping over myself the whole time and figuring things out the hard way, now I had a resource, somebody that I could reach out to and say, hey, how did you do this? How do I approach that? And I've been part of that community for about 4 years now. So early on, I think I was part of the course for about a year, maybe less, let's say 9 months. Jason put up a video explaining blockchain and NFTs. And it's like, well, this is what it is. And here are collectors. And this is how you build a community and all these sort of things. And that just completely resonated with where I was in my career at that stage. Because you got to keep in mind, I'm in Cape Town. So Cape Town is on the southernmost tip of Africa. It's that first world pocket that I alluded to earlier. But everything north of me, sort of like on the continent, is very much third world. Okay. My closest first world territories are Europe, and then across the pond, you've got North America and maybe a little bit of South America in Argentina. So if I print something here in South Africa and I frame it, to ship it from Cape Town to, let's say, Germany, or from Cape Town to the US, more often than not, costs more than the actual piece of art costs. So that's a huge deterrent for potential investors, okay, for people who want to buy my art. But when you go online, when you go onto blockchain, when you use NFT and the technology behind that, all of a sudden, the logistical dilemma, the logistical bottleneck just falls away because now we have a mechanism that can prove provenance. Okay, so provenance is just a fancy way of saying this is a history of the art from the creator and all its different owners, because that's where the value in art is. If you look at your classical art, your Van Goghs, your Picassos, all of these have to have provenance in order to be valuable. If there's no provenance, if nobody can prove that it's all the way back from Da Vinci, then it's just a piece of, cloth with some paint on it. But as soon as you have the provenance, then it becomes valuable. And blockchain does all that inherently. So that's why I got into it. It was putting my work, which was very much for the developed world or for the first world, in an environment where there was no logistical bottleneck, and putting it in front of people in economies that have the disposable income, meaning that I don't have to market it locally, where it's a completely different economy and people don't have that kind of disposable income.
Wow, that's pretty good. And then how did you go, or how did you discover to put it on Cardano? Because that for me is one of my best, of my favorite platforms. And
Yeah.
I've been on it so early that I actually own one of the very first NFTs on the a blockchain when it first started allowing for that. And I think I own over 500 NFTs because of the art. Like, it's something about it just resonates with me, just owning it digitally, because I'm like, I can have a whole collection without physically being here. And then it's also smaller artists that express themselves from different parts of the world that I started realizing, I'm like, oh, these artists are from, a lot of them from South America, or that they wouldn't have access to show off their art to the world if they didn't come to like these NFT platforms. How was that?
Yeah. So I think my first NFTs were on Ethereum, with OpenSea, where you had to put some ETH in your wallet, and then you had to pay a transaction fee just to synchronize your wallet with the blockchain. So that's costly for me as a South African, okay, because we have a completely different economic bracket. But still, I saved up, I put the money in, and I could synchronize my wallet. And the first collection I had available was my shadow work collection. Um, but around that time, Jason, in the art of selling art, introduced us to Cardano, and he's like, "Hey guys, look at this. This is something that's a little bit more manual, okay? But look at the gas fees, like they're virtually non-existent. Look at the transaction fees. Look at what you can do with this." And because of my technical aptitude and my background, like it all just resonated. I was like, "Oh wow, this is really cool." And the more I got into it, the more I understood that Cardano was not a Silicon Valley like initiative. It wasn't supposed to be like the blockchain of the world. Instead, they had taken a more academic approach. So they reached out to professors and masters in the computer science field way ahead of time and asked them for theses, for papers, for an academic approach on what does the ideal blockchain look like. And Cardano as a blockchain is the end result of that. So I think that as a result of that approach, this is why Cardano is also called the people's blockchain, because it was developed with the everyday man sort of like in mind, where something like Ethereum, which I understand Hoskins was, he played a key development role in the beginning. Um, it does have that Silicon Valley bravado attached to it, because when Ethereum opened up, they immediately had endorsements for like Adobe and all the big players in those games. But Cardano was just like the little guy. It's just like we're going to do something that impacts everybody, and we're not going to roll it out through Apple, Microsoft, Adobe, all those big players. It's just going to be sort of like an open source kind of blockchain. So yeah, there were many principles and like the ethos of Cardano that resonated with me, and that's why I went that route. So much so that my NFTs had been shown in Cardano-based like festivals or conferences in Dubai, in Las Vegas. I was so we had a Cardano center open up here in Cape Town. We'll circle back to that in a bit. But yeah, I mean, because of blockchain, my work has now been all over the world. And I've done all that from the comfort of my laptop here in Cape Town.
Wow. I know Cardano has a lot of initiatives, especially in Africa. They have a presence in all of these developing countries and locations so that people have access to these financial tools that they wouldn't otherwise have access to, and also see things, or also like investments, because art is an investment and people want to be a part of it. Even if they don't have a lot of money, they want to be a part of this new like world economic like tool. How is that? How do
Mhm.
you go about that? Like, for one, like, how do you consider art an investment? And two, how was that Cardano Center in South Africa?
So yes, the key way to go about it is education. You have to educate people about the technology. You have to explain to them that you can earn royalties. You have to teach them how to market and how to talk to the developed world, because the day-to-day conversation in a country like South Africa is just different. And the way we sell to each other is different than the way the Americans want to be sold to or the Germans want to be sold to. Um, I feel like the Web3 NFT wave hit South Africa, but mostly all of the negative things associated penetrated. So by the time the Cardano Center opened up, um, firstly, I had a meeting with them and we got into agreement that I would be the first ever featured artist at a Cardano Center. And I built a collection in partnership with them called Prism, which is on the website and the NFTs are available too. But in addition to me having the exhibition at the center, we were hosting a set of workshops, of which there were three. So the first one was for the art galleries. So we invited local galleries to say, guys, this is what blockchain is, this is OPSEC. These are all the important things that you need to know in order to participate in the global sort of like scheme of things. The second workshop was for the collector. So if you're just somebody who's got some crypto and you want to understand what the buzz is about, here's some basic theory. And then the third one was for artists. So if you're a photographer, if you're a painter, if you are somebody in the visual space, and you want to leverage this new technology to get your work into the hands of collectors abroad, like this is a workshop for you. And we aggressively promoted it. We did interviews, we were running ads. I was speaking one on one with all the gallery owners in Cape Town, and we had zero turnout. It was heartbreaking. And the reason, like after the fact, you do like a post-mortem. You're like, why didn't this work? Like, what are we doing wrong? And my only conclusion is that when I was speaking to the gallery owners, for example, and explaining to them Web3 and like we're doing a workshop for artists, they had already been exposed to like the scammy part of NFTs, where they receive a DM from some guy, oh, I saw your picture on Facebook. I want to buy it as an NFT. Da, 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 da. And then some of them, not knowing any better, fell prey to these scams, and now their opinion of this technology is forever tainted. So that's why when you ask the question, I emphasize the importance of education. In order for blockchain, in order for Web3 and NFTs to be utilized to its full potential, you have to explain to the masses what it is, you know. But if it's just a buzzword and their only experience with it is somebody trying to scam them out of their hard-earned money, it's not going to take off. So sadly, the Cardano Center closed down last year because there isn't interest for that in South Africa at the moment. But I do know that they have earmarked other territories for similar initiatives, which include Bali, which include Dubai. The founders of the Cardano Center are based in Singapore, and they're developing some really cool technology called, I think it's called Open Frame or Open Window. I'll have to double check with you. But essentially, what it is, it's a digital frame that connects with your Web3 wallet, so that when you travel, whether it's from hotel to hotel or from hotel to yacht or wherever you are, your art can follow you wherever you go. And it's a beautiful piece of hardware. They've done really a lot of work to make sure that it looks high end, that it presents as well in a gallery space as it would in somebody's bedroom or office. And yeah, that was part of the initiative. So they did a hardware solution and a software solution. So the software solution is called Curate. And I've been working with Curate for quite some time, like bug testing and fixing and giving suggestions. So I'm very excited about that space, but keep in mind that, proximity is power. And for me to be like this small little ember in Cape Town, as opposed to like these huge wildfires in North America and Europe, it's very difficult to maintain enthusiasm without sort of like the mental anguish that goes with something like that. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm very optimistic about it, but locally here in South Africa, I've had no other choice but to step back from it a little bit.
And have you been like helping other artists as well, like in any way, whether it's NFTs or how to go about building their brand as a artist?
Yeah. So we mentioned early on that after Ibiza and during COVID, I was building websites for myself, and people took notice and asked me to build websites for them. These days, that's the majority of my revenue, is building online presences for established artists. So there's a difference between somebody who's just starting out and still figuring out their style, as opposed to somebody who's been doing their art form 30, 40, 50 years and is considered an absolute master in their field. Those established artists, those are my ideal clients because they know everything they need to know about their art form, whether that's painting or writing or whatever the case might be. What they don't know is the coding component. How do I build a website? How do I create an online identity and brand? How do I do social media? Is social media like the right thing for me? And that's where I've been able to add the most value, is helping established creatives onboard their creativity. And in that repertoire, I've helped. So I think my highest profile client is Professor Pumla Gabodo Malikizela. She is the 2024 laureate of the Templeton Prize, which is sort of like the equivalent of a Nobel Prize, but
Mhm.
for psychology. So I built her website maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and every month I do updates for her, make sure the website is nice and secure and safe. And whenever there's content that she wants to upload to the internet, I am her gateway. I am her contact person. So instead of her having to learn how to build a website, she just does her work at an exceptional level, sends it to me as a PDF or a Word document, and I make sure that whatever's online is on par with her caliber, her quality of work.
Wow, that's very crazy. One of the last questions is about your art, the Ember Flow. I think it
Hmm.
looks really good, and I hope everyone in the audience, because it's a podcast, can go to his website, which will be all linked below, to see his art because I think it's so like vibrant. Can you go more on it?
Yeah. So Ember Flow was the first piece in my Prism collection, which I built with the Cardano Center. So keep in mind that one of the key objectives we had when building this collection is we wanted to show off the digital gallery space. So I felt like the best way to do that is to create a collection that goes through the entire color spectrum, which is why the collection is called Prism. And with lighting theory, we understand that like visible light starts at like reddish, so non-visible light is infrared, then goes to red, orange, yellows, greens, and then blues, magentas, purples. So that's the entire color spectrum. So each piece of art in the Prism collection is a representation of a specific color. And Emberflow is the first piece of that journey. It's in that reds, oranges, and when you see it on a high resolution HD digital frame, it just pops. And this photo is essentially, I think it was a 30-second exposure, maybe longer, maybe like a 1 minute exposure of a fire dancer. And I just managed to do some overlays, some magic in Photoshop to make it as vibrant as possible.
Yeah, I hope everyone checks it out in the audience because I think it really is a really good piece. And for the final things, do you have any tips for like aspiring artists or that want to go into art but aren't really sure if they should?
Advice for artists: find coaches, find mentors, find people who have achieved who you want to achieve, like what you want to achieve, and build community. Like the only way you are going to make this sustainable is if people um, know you, trust you, and like you. Because when they do either one or all three of those, they are willing to part with their hard-earned money to support you. But if you are just going to be showing up online saying, buy this, buy this, buy this, buy this, you're not going to have any success. Nobody signs onto social media with the intention of, hey, I wonder what ads Alvin is running today. People go online because they want to learn, because they want to be entertained, because they want to improve themselves. And if you want to do that with your art, those are the things that you have to focus on. Focus on message, focus on value, and from there you can start going into the sales mode. But just doing the cold call hard selling, it's nearly impossible without the proper context and building relationships with people.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being in the podcast. All your links will be in the description below, and I hope everyone can check out your artwork to see what you described and other pieces that you have available.
Yeah, I would love for that to happen. If people want to learn more about me and my creative journey, they can go to my website, juliusjooste.com. That's JULIUSJOOSTE.com. For the fine art, I have created a dedicated subdomain, and that can be found at fineart.juliusjooste.com. That's FINEART dot JULIUSJOOSTE.com. And from the fine art subdomain, you can view the physical pieces and the NFTs. So obviously NFTs are available internationally, but physical pieces are printed, framed, and packaged in Germany and then distributed to 48 countries around the world. So yeah, add one to your collection today.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for being on podcast.
Thanks for having me.